Hi, everybody. This is Kate Haley with Glazer's Camera. I hope you're all having a great afternoon. We are back today with a second presentation, totally different topic. If you joined us at noon for our session with Bobby Lane, it was really awesome. If you missed it, check it out on our YouTube channel. But don't do that right now. Hang out. We're going to hang out with Mishalla from Olympus, and we're going to talk about the super control panel on your Olympus camera. Sorry, I feel like I have to do like this dramatic voice when I talk about that. Real quick before we get started though, just a couple of quick reminders about Glazers. We are open 7 days a week. We know that our governor just implemented a new kind of like stay at home, do what you need to, but try not to be out in the world too much order. But we are going to remain open during this time. If you're not comfortable coming in, that's totally fine. You can place your orders online. You can do curbside pickup. We're still doing those things. So anyhow, check it out. Go to our website. Make sure you get what you want this holiday season for yourself or maybe someone in your life. We are doing our holiday event a little bit differently this year, as we've had to do all of our events a little bit differently this year, in that we're not going to do that big 2-day sale in the store where we have vendors and representatives like Mishalla come in and hang out. We're going to do a series of sales over the next several weeks, and they'll be available in store on our website, and you'll find them mostly marketed via our email and some social media posts. So if you're not on our newsletter already, I would encourage you to join it. We'll be sending a couple of newsletters a week going forward, just to spread out all the great deals that are happening through vendors and also some specials we're going to run in store. So with that all said, we're going to get started on this session called Learning Your Super Control Panel. We have Mishalla from Olympus with us, who's going to kind of walk you through this. And if you have questions, post those in the comments on Facebook or in the chat room on YouTube. We'll do some Q&A throughout on the related thing that she's talking about. So if you have a question on a different element of the super control panel than she's talking about right at that moment, you can post your question, but you may want to hang on to it until we get to that element. And some questions we may just hold until the end. But we're really excited. Mishalla, hi, how you doing? I love all the color you got going on there.
Yeah, I do a different color every week, so I'm doing pink today.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. Seattle area, you guys probably know me. You've probably seen me in the store. I'm Mishalla. I'm the West Coast rep for Olympus, and today I have the very boring task of teaching you the super control panel. The super control panel is going to be a little bit different than your deep menu in our camera. This shouldn't take too long. I'm just going to give you kind of a tour around all the buttons and what they mean, and then we'll go to some Q&A. This is a kind of like a getting to know your Olympus 101 lesson. This is the first place that you should learn on your camera. So if you're unfamiliar with it, you're in the right spot today.
Hey, Mishalla.
So, yeah.
Just super quick before we dive in, will this apply to the OMD EM Mark I?
The OMD EM1 Mark I.
Or the EM1, rather.
Okay, so the EM1, yes. Okay. And some things will just be in different places. Okay. So as we go through, I'll show you some kind of images of the backs of the camera, and we'll take the tour around the super control panel. Older models will have a slightly different looking super control panel and maybe won't have all of the same features we're talking about, but they might have something similar. Does that make sense?
Okay, that totally makes sense. Let's dive in. All right.
Awesome. So if we could share my screen, my presentation screen. Cool, thank you. Like I said, we're learning today the super control panel with Olympus. So again, kind of your top level menu. This is the first place that you should be at on your camera when you're getting familiar with it. And most people don't even realize that, because instinctually we think hit your menu button to make decisions and make changes on your camera. But realistically, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to use your super control panel for quick access to regularly used settings. So this is stuff that you're shooting with all the time. You want to make quick changes. It will keep you out of that deep menu. So it'll keep you out of scrolling through a bunch of pages, trying to find something, and you're not maybe even sure what it's called, what you're looking for, this will really kind of keep you centered. And you can just activate it by pressing the OK button. We're going to go through a couple slides on that. And then when you get to an item, you can activate it by hitting OK again. So this OK button on the back of your screen is very important. Anything that is highlighted in green is what you're going to make adjustments to. So you can open it and get into it deeper to see what's in there, like so your ISO or white balance, things like that, by selecting OK again once you've highlighted it. The other thing is that you can highlight it and actually use your front dial to scroll through the options. So I super don't recommend doing that until you're really comfortable with what lives inside each of those boxes. I use the front dial when I need to make quick changes to ISO because that's a pretty straightforward thing to make an adjustment to. But so there's different styles, and that was kind of what I was talking about with the question that Kate asked, is there's different kind of styles of what the super control panel might look like on your computer. It should look like this. It is available on your live view screen and in your EVF. So if you hit OK while you're shooting in your viewfinder, you'll still be able to see the super control panel. Which is actually really convenient. Sorry, I just stopped back. It's really convenient when you're doing something quick like changing ISO. And I know now our newer models have an ISO dedicated button, but if you don't have that button, this is a really quick way to, get comfortable with just hitting OK right away and then highlighting ISO with your eye to the viewfinder and then using your front dial to scroll through. So, hitting your OK button. There is one caveat to the OK button. It's on almost every model except for the EM10 Mark III. And the EPL9 and 10, actually. They will have this button called the shortcut button. It's up on the top of your camera, and that will bring up different types of things. But when you're shooting in auto, it'll bring up the auto guide. That is one thing else to mention. If you're following along right now and you're hitting your OK button, but your screen is popping up and looking like this instead, it's because you're in auto mode. The super control panel is only accessible in PSA or M, so program, shutter priority, aperture priority, or manual. So if you're getting this view and you're not seeing all these great details, that's by design. When you're in auto, your camera does not want to let you make those choices on your own. But yeah, so if you have the art modes and the scene modes on the EM10 Mark III, if you hit the shortcut button, those will pop up. But if you're in PSA or M and you hit that shortcut button, you will get the super control panel that we're talking about today. Okay, so there's two different appearances for most people's. There is also, like, when we're going way back into like the original EM5, it's going to look a lot different than this too. But EM5 Mark III, EM10 Mark III, the EM5 Mark IIs, they should all look something sort of like this. You should have most of these options available. The newer one, this is our newest one, EM1 Mark II, Mark III, EM1X, it all kind of looks like this. If you have EM1X or Mark III and you have the dual memory card slots, that's what these two are for. We'll go over that. So that's really the only major change. And then this is, like I was saying, with the PenF, the EM5, the original EM10, they're going to have a slightly different view screen. It's going to look like this. So while it's mostly the same, there's just a few things that'll be moved into different parts. However, almost all of the icons are the same. So as we go through this, you should be able to find and access them, okay? I like that I'm saying okay to people like they're going to respond to me, but I'm just talking to the internet. Okay, so very first top corner, like we said before, ISO. So if you just want to make a quick change to your ISO, hitting OK, it should hover on that area when you first turn on your camera. If you just hit OK, that's the first place that it's going to go, is that top left corner. Like I said, you can use your front dial to make changes to that really rapidly. That is one that I tend to use my front dial for almost always, because I'm very comfortable in knowing what different ISOs are going to do. So I don't need to really delve into making adjustments deeper than that. I can easily scroll through and say, hey, I need to go to ISO 400 for this situation. However, anything that you have highlighted, you can use your arrow pad on the back to navigate to different spots. Anything that you have highlighted, if you hit OK, you can actually dive a bit deeper in. So we're going to kind of take the scenic route around. So we're going to go all over the super control panel in like a figure eight. The one on the very bottom, you might have one boxes or you might have two, is your picture quality. If you have two boxes, again, it's because you have dual memory card slots, so you're telling it to write different things to those spots. However, this would be where you would set if you want to shoot RAW, large SF. So large SF is super fine. So that's the highest quality JPEG image you can get. I always recommend, if you're not going to shoot RAW, you should at least put it in the LSF. It's going to give you the best picture quality. Then obviously there's large fine, large normal, medium normal. We're getting smaller and smaller. If you're just making something that you're just going to stick on your Instagram account, maybe you could use those smaller sizes if you'd like. There is the combination also of large JPEG, large superfine plus RAW, large fine plus RAW, large normal plus RAW. You know, you kind of get the idea. So all of your different variations of picture quality will live there. So if you want to make quick changes, that's where you would do that. And if you have the dual memory card slot, of course, you can do those independently of each other. So you can put like RAW on one card and JPEG on the other, or what have you. The one right above that, on your camera right now, if you're following along, it's probably a little rectangle that's pretty straightforward and standard. Depending on what model you have will depend on what actually lives in here. Sorry, one sec, I need a sip of tea. Ouch, okay. Depending on what camera model you have, you know, you'll have different things in here, because certain cameras have, you know, the pro end stuff will have a little bit more bells and whistles in here. But so this is kind of like what we consider your drive mode for your camera. So standard is just going to be a single shot. So every time you press the shutter, it takes one picture. The next one with the little heart is going to be silent shooting. I don't know who came up with the heart meaning silent, but it's silent. The next one, as you go through, is probably sequential high. That is like a burst mode. So that's taking several images. So if you're seeing an action shot and you're trying to capture it, like a sporting event, you can take lots of shots. Sequential high, and there's a sequential low. Depending on what model you have, be careful with this. There's also a silent sequential high, which if you have like EM1X or EM1 Mark III, that's 60 frames per second. And if you accidentally set that and you don't realize that you've done such a thing, or you forget and you go to pick up your camera later and you shoot it and you're like, wow, it's not doing anything. And then you realize you've taken 687 photos. So just be really careful with that. Because when I say silent, I mean that it's completely silent and you don't realize that as you're holding the shutter down going, hey, it's not working, it's definitely working. So just something to keep in mind. If you have EM5 Mark III or newer, there should also be this thing called Pro Capture High. And so Pro Capture, there's Pro Cap High, Pro Cap Low, and Pro Capture, which we've talked about in some of our other Olympus classes with Glazers, is a pre-burst mode. So it's pre-buffering your shot before the action is taken. And when you press your shutter, you'll actually be able to capture when you press the shutter and 15 frames before and as many as you want after. Very awesome for like impact shots, like a bird taking off, a bear catching a fish, baseball hit, things like that. I'm not going to go super deep into that today because we have a special features class on that. So join that one next time. Again, silent sequential shooting low. So that's just a slower frame rate, less shots are being taken. And then obviously the pro capture low as well. This is also where your remote timer, your timers live. So if you want to count down, and then there's a custom self timer. So where you can make adjustments, like it'll keep taking photos or it'll take photos after 2 seconds. That sort of thing. So if you are looking for your clock, your timers, so that you can get your really great family photo in front of the Christmas tree this year, that's where that lives. And then this last guy, which is only on EM1X, EM1 Mark II, Mark III, and Pen F. It is high-res shot mode. I call it the waffle mode because it looks like a little waffle. So the waffle, you'll thank me for this later when you remember, oh yeah, the waffle. The waffle mode is high-res shot mode. So if you have that feature on your camera, that is where you can get that 50 megapixel JPEG, 80 megapixel RAW, depending on what camera model we're talking about. Definitely check that out on your model specific. So that's a super high res image done with a pixel shift. Very cool feature. Again, that's part of my special features class. You can join that one next time. Okay, so we're gonna go up to the top. Again, I told you, we're taking a loopy route around this. So the top right next to your ISO is going to be another basic change that you might need to make in everyday shooting. And that's going to be your white balance, obviously. There's a whole bunch of different options in there. There's auto. The auto actually works really well on these cameras. There are some times that I have to, redirect my camera, but for the most part, if you're unfamiliar with, trying custom white balances, the auto is fairly reliable. I think it works great. There's sun, there's shade, there's cloud, there's flash, there's tungsten, there's flash. And then if we go down to the next one, if you keep following through, if you scroll through it, you'll get to underwater white balance. Most of our cameras do have underwater housing, so they can be used underwater. So that's an important white balance. Flash. And then this one down here is the capture white balance. There's 4 different channel or settings that you can do that you can save 4 different ones. And this is actually really convenient, especially if you're doing work in like studio or you want to get truly accurate white balance. So all you do for that one is select it and then hit OK. And there'll be a button that are on the screen. It'll pop up and say, do you want to capture? Press info. If you hit info, you just point your camera at something white with the lighting situation you have and press your shutter, and it will choose the correct color temperature for what you're shooting. It's super, super easy to use. So I would encourage you to test that out. If you want to get very accurate white balance, it's really great. And again, you can have 4 different ones. So if you have a regular studio setup that you use often, and the situation is always the same, you can save it to like, custom 1 and just know that you can set it to that and you should be ready to go. The last one is going to be your custom white balance. And that one you can select a different Kelvin temperature from 2000 to 14,000. That can be really helpful in things like shooting the night sky, because you really kind of want to override your camera's senses. You don't want to rely on an auto white balance for that sort of thing. So you can make adjustments there. Sometimes I use the custom just to change kind of the color temperature of my JPEGs. Like I just want to warm up an image or cool it down for an artistic effect that I'm going for. And the nice thing is that if you go into this white balance, if you click OK on that one, you should be able to see as you're making changes to the white balance, you can see it on your screen live. So you can see, this is what warming up this image does. This is what cooling it down does, which is very convenient. if you want to take some artistic liberties in what you think the correct white balance should be. I do it all the time. I highly encourage it. From there, you can also make extra adjustments as well. There's an amber control and a green color control, and you can add or subtract those out of there. And those are going to live right next to the white balance. I'm pretty sure everyone's camera should have that one. The next one is going to be right below that, and that's focus mode. This is another super important one because if you're changing up what you're shooting pretty regularly, it's nice to know how to navigate in and out of those. So your camera right now, if you're on this one, probably says SAF, and that's fine. That's single autofocus. So that's very, very standard how most of the time we're shooting. If we're using like say a burst mode and action shots, we might want to use continuous autofocus, CAF. So that's going to be continuously refocusing on your subjects as you're shooting through. I use that a lot for like sports photography when I'm chasing my kids around on the lacrosse field. I will definitely use the continuous autofocus because they move really fast. Manual focus, pretty straightforward. But sometimes if you don't have the manual focus clutch on your lens, so say you're using like the 60mm macro and you're trying to figure out how to get it into manual focus so that you can do a nice close-up shot, that's how you would access that and put it into manual focus because that lens doesn't have a clutch. The other option is, and this isn't on every camera, but it's there, single autofocus plus manual focus. So this can be actually really helpful again when you're talking macro photography, but it can be useful for other things as well. So essentially it will use single autofocus to nail your focus point and get you in the ballpark of where you're focusing. And then it will automatically switch over to manual so you can immediately start using your focus ring to try to really dial in exactly where in the image you want to have in focus. Pre-MF, again, not on all cameras. I don't think. Pre-MF is a way that you can actually preset your manual focus range. So we talk about this a lot in the night sky photography class. People will often utilize pre-MF for setting a focus distance. So say like setting your lens manually at infinity. That way, when you set it to pre-MF, it will save that distance and automatically focus to there, which is really helpful when you're focusing in the dark. And then the last one is continuous autofocus with tracking. And so again, it's going to be really similar to that continuous focus, like we're talking sports or birds or things that are moving pretty regularly. The nice thing about it is it actually places a target on where your focus point is, and it will hold that target. So say we're talking a football helmet or a bird's head or something like that, it will actually just continue to follow that subject around until you either capture the image or the target can turn red, and that means that it's lost focus, and so it'll want you to reconfirm the focus again. But it actually works pretty well. It works really great for football helmets, actually, but also very popular with birding, because if you can focus right on the head of the bird, you can actually follow it around as it's going through the frame, and it'll continuously be focusing. And you can use that in unison with like sequential shooting. So like if you're shooting sequential low, you can continuously focus and shoot, and it will recompose focus in between shots. Sorry, guys. All right. So still image stabilization. This is going to vary camera to camera as well, a little bit, not much. So that should be right here. This is auto, this is off. So IS auto should be, I think it's default what it comes out of on the box. It is the stabilization that's built into your camera. That is a very positive, awesome, super great thing. I wouldn't mess with it too often. Don't accidentally turn it off. You'll be really sad when your images get a little bit of motion blur. The auto is all 5-axis stabilization plus auto detection for panning. It's a pretty smart system. So it can kind of tell if you're panning left or right or up or down. Obviously off is off. I hope that's self-explanatory. um, IS1, so that's going to just be the 5-axis stabilization, which is also fine. It won't detect for hand movement like panning. IS2, so that one is going to be a horizontal pan. So that's like if you're at the racetrack and you're following cars, you're telling it to stop compensating for that rapid hand movement you're making. And then IS3 is going to be obviously panning vertical so that you can reduce that compensation. So when would you turn it off? If you are using a tripod, it's often recommended to turn it off. I am not a stickler on that, especially when I'm doing things at really long telephoto lengths. I tend to leave it on, even on my tripod, just to help with the shake that I might get from such magnification. But if you're using a tripod and you want to turn it off, you can. And then the next one is movie image stabilization. Again, this might look different depending on what camera model you have. MS1 is pretty standard. I think that's what it should be default. MS1 is just going to be your camera's standard in-body stabilization, which is actually really amazing for movie. Depending on what camera model you have, it can be really amazing. You should try it out sometime if you haven't. MS2 is a little bit different. MIS2, sorry, I can't talk today. That is the camera's in-body stabilization, but it's also enhanced with a digital stabilization. Now, it just kind of smooths out your image a little bit more. You will find cropping to your video just a little bit to compensate for the stabilization that it's doing digitally. So just keep that in mind if you're going to use that one. If it's purity you're looking for, you will lose a little bit of that as it's cropped in, but great for home videos and things like that. Awesome, and it makes it very smooth. And then obviously MS off. If you're using a third-party gimbal system or stabilizer, you can always turn that off and rely on your stabilizer, your external stabilizer instead. Am I doing okay, Kate? Am I going too fast?
Well, I think you're good. We did have one question come in. So let me get back to that super quick. Actually, now there's a second question. They just kind of sneak them in on me. So you mentioned AntiShock at one point, I think. Could you talk about what AntiShock?
I forgot about that. The AntiShock is only on certain camera models. It's the one with the diamond. What's the question though?
Oh, no, they just want to know what it is. What is AntiShock?
So it's supposed to stop shutter shock when the shutter goes down. Oh gosh, now I'm going to mess this up. I always mess this up because I never use AntiShock. I've read so many articles on this too, and it never comes out when I want to say it. But essentially it's to stop shutter shock when I think it's the rear curtain sync comes down. I can circle back on that one. But yes, it should be on there. Only certain models have it though, and I think it's only on the EM1 series and maybe the EM5 series. I don't think it's on the 10s at all.
Maybe a quick peek in the manual too could help explain it a little bit.
I can look at it again. I always relay it wrong because I don't use it.
Okay. No, I know exactly what you mean. I'm the same way with certain things as well. Yeah. So if someone's using a longer shutter speed to drag the shutter or shake the camera, do they turn off stabilization?
Ooh,
that's
depends.
Subjective,
Are you trying to get, I mean, you're still going to get motion blur at long exposures. I guess I'm not clear on what exactly they're asking. Even with the stabilization on, so say you're trying to take a really long exposure and you maybe fire an off-camera flash and then you shake the camera, you're still going to see that motion blur. Your camera can't compensate for that.
Yeah, if you're doing intentional camera movement, then that's going to be different. Like I took a camera down to Pike Place Market at night and did a 2-second exposure of that main market sign, and I got it, and then I intentionally moved, and so I froze it, but then I got some cool light trails. So if you're doing that, just don't worry about it. leave it on.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to worry about your stabilization for something like that at all.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right,
Yeah.
let's keep rolling. We're good.
Okay, so we're kind of going down and over, and we're going to go to the aspect ratio. So this is the aspect of your image that comes out of your camera. Applicable only to JPEGs, actually, now that I think about it, because if it's the raw file, it will always be the native size. So the native size to your camera is obviously 4/3 because your camera is an Olympus Micro 4/3 camera. So that is your full sensor. I generally recommend always leaving it on that, but there are options to change it. You can change it vertically to 3/4. You can do a 16:9 shot, a 1:1 square, 3:2. Keep in mind when it is creating that in camera, those will be crops. So it's cropping in on your sensor. So I always kind of just go with the let's shoot it at 4/3. And if we want to crop it later, we can, shoot wider and leave yourself more room. I wouldn't mess with your aspect ratio too much, but again, that's only going to affect your JPEG images, not your raw files. And actually, a lot of the stuff on the right-hand side is pretty much just on JPEG images. The next one is your metering. So, sorry, I've been on Zooms all day. My throat is killing me. All right. 324 area ESP, electroselective pattern. So this is pretty much standard. That's what it's going to be on most of the time. If you're using anything where your camera's evaluating your exposure, so PSA and auto, those kind of things, scene modes where your camera's doing the work on your exposure. I find that the ESP works really well for most things. It basically tries to take an evaluative approach at the whole scene and say, okay, there's a lot of dark here, there's a lot of light here, there's some gray here, and blends it all together to find the proper exposure for everything. That can be challenging sometimes if you have harsh shadows or super bright lights, things like that. Obviously it's a computer, so it can only guess so well what you want to expose for. So if you're in a situation where you have dramatic differences, you can do things like center weighted metering, which is going to meter off the center, spot metering, which will meter off the spot you tell it to, which is generally the focus point. That can work really well with things like moon photography. So if you're not using a manual exposure for your moon photography, you might consider, spot metering or highlight metering, because you really want to be metering for just the moon itself, not the dark sky, because that's a lot of black information and it's going to expose incorrectly instead of exposing for that bright white light that you should be exposing for. And then also the inverse of that would be the spot shadow metering. So again, if you're just shooting day to day, ESP works great. It's what it should be in most of the time. I don't take mine out very often unless I'm doing something that is very specific. Or, in general, I'm going to shoot in manual because our cameras allow that, because you can see the shot before you even take it. It's pretty easy to shoot in manual. But if you're not, or if you're doing like birds and you're using like aperture priority, it's pretty reliable. But there are situations where you might need to change it. So it's good to know where that lives. So like I said, the right side is going to go into a lot of stuff about essentially JPEG images. So if you're shooting raw only and you make changes to these, you will see them through your viewfinder with these said changes that we're going to go through. However, your raw file is still going to be raw. If you do use Olympus Workspace, you can actually, there's a setting in there when you import your images and you can say edit as shot, and it will apply all the camera settings that you had adjusted in here to your raw file, which is kind of convenient. But it essentially allows you to see it the way you want to see it, but not applying it to your image. However, if you're shooting in JPEG only, it will apply all of those edits to your image, and that's what you will get on your memory card. That's what you'll get in Lightroom or Olympus Workspace or whatever you're using. You can also do both, where you can shoot, large JPEG and RAW, and then you would have both of those images. You would have your edited version of it, or and your RAW to work through. So the top one is going to be your picture mode. So your camera's probably in natural currently. I think that's the default setting. Depending on what camera I'm shooting, will sometimes throw mine in vivid. Just makes your colors a little punchier. It can make faces a little red, so be careful there. I like to keep my pen F in vivid, just makes it a little bit more exciting. Portrait smooths out the skin, I think, and highlights a little better. I don't actually use that one very often. Monochrome, obviously, so that's where you can adjust to make your images black and white. So if you don't have a pen F with the black and white dial on the front, all of our other cameras, this right here is where you can set your camera to black and white while you're shooting. Muted tones, custom color, eye enhance, actually e-portrait's the one, sorry, that smooths your skin all nice. Underwater, color creator, there's all kinds of different, there's literally so many things you can do to edit your photos in here. And then you can make different adjustments with like color filter type things with the color creator. And then also all of your art filters live at the very end. So once you get through all of these, you'll see like 16 different art filters. That's kind of nice too, if you're into those in-camera artistic effects and filters and things like that. You can have the JPEG version of that, and then also your RAWs, so you can keep your individual images, which is nice. Or your original images, not individual. Makes it kind of nice because you can get a pre-edited kind of artistic file, and then also still have your original RAWs. Sorry guys. Okay, so the next one is right below SAF, your autofocus point. So this is your face and eye detection spot. It's kind of important to know where it is, because if you're not shooting people, I would always recommend just turning that off. So if you're out doing landscapes for the day or shooting birds for the day, I usually try to remember to turn facial recognition off so that it's not telling my camera to constantly be looking for a face. That makes sense. If it's on, you'll have a couple of different choices. You can have face, which will be your closest, most visible face, and eyes, and it'll just pick an eye. Or you can just have it select face, where it's just looking for the closest face and the clearest face. And then you can also give it face and right eye priority, where it'll focus on the right eye, or left eye. A lot of times I'll use the face with the closest prominent eye. That works fine for me. I actually disable this a lot unless I'm at an event where I'm like shooting a lot of people and I'm trying to focus on kind of crowds of people, or candid shots. When I'm doing things like actual portraits and things like that, I generally rely on putting the focus point exactly where I want it with the single autofocus point. So it's kind of up to you. When you have this engaged, you'll see when people walk up to your camera, a white box will go around their face. And that's telling you that your camera has recognized a human. It wants to photograph it. So once you get that, if you press your shutter halfway down, it'll turn that white box green to confirm that it is locked focus on their face. And then you can obviously photograph from there. Or if you have the eye priority, it'll put a square around their eyes. And this has gotten very advanced in the newest models, the EM1 Mark III. You can target faces very far away and very accurately, even wearing glasses and side profiles. It's really amazing. So, The next one, we're going to go to the left a little bit, and that's your flash mode. So there's a couple of different modes in here, applicable to pretty much any sort of flash system you put on. If you put on an Olympus flash, if you put on the pop-up or the little flash that comes in the box, or if you put on any sort of Olympus specific flash, like the Godox made for Olympus, or I think Nissan, you know, those things, you should have most of these controls available. And they're pretty self-explanatory if you're shooting flash, but you can go through depending on what camera model you have. You may have more or less. There's fill-in, red eye reduction flash, flash off. So if you have it on, but you want to quickly turn it off, you can. Fill in slow sync flash, fill in slow sync flash with red eye, fill in second curtain slow sync flash, and manual flash. So there's all kinds of different versions of the slow flash. So if you're shooting at night and you're trying to drag some light in, you can do that. I generally leave mine on the manual flash or high, what is the word? I just lost it. Holy cow. Sorry. I coughed and lost a word. Or full power mode, because I do a lot of like high speed sync flash, like all the Olympus flashes. I think Godox, all those guys will sync fast flash. And then your flash compensation. So from here, you can control your flash compensation as well. So your exposure compensation for your flash is right below the actual flash, the lightning. It makes sense, right? And then your video settings, we're going to go back over to the right. Like I said, this is not in any form of order. I love it. So this is where you can make quick adjustments to what video mode you want to shoot at. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of them. They're going to be completely different depending on what camera model you have. So take a tour around those and see your different settings that are available in your camera, because every model, every time we come out with a new model, there's a new version or level of video that you can film at. So everyone is going to be slightly different, but that's where you'd make those adjustments. Custom function buttons, that lives down in the bottom right corner for most of you guys. I think some of you might not have that. But so this is a quick way to make adjustments to your custom buttons in your menu. So if you don't want to have to dig all the way through the deep menu to get to save, you know, focus peaking or something on one of your buttons, you can just go to that and select it, and it will actually take you straight to the button function page. Right? So you can choose what to assign to your ISO button or your AEL, AFL button or your dial switches. So it's a nice quick way to get there. Sorry, guys. Okay, so the one right above that, if you have it, would be the tone curve, highlight, shadow. So again, these are JPEG edits in your camera. I like to shoot with a nice S curve in my camera always. I like contrast. It's just my thing. So I have mine set for my JPEGs to be that way. However, you can select that and this will pop up, and your front dial will adjust your highlight, your back dial will adjust your shadow. And if you hit info, I think it will give you the midtones as well. So you can do all kinds of different. So if that's something that you're doing, you're finding you do in Lightroom a lot, you can apply that automatically to your JPEG files in camera. It's just another in-camera edit that you can make without having to go back and edit it later, which I like if it's something simple that I'm just shooting that I'm just going to post kind of right away anyway. Just takes one step out of the process flow, I guess. Color space, sRGB or Adobe, depending on what you prefer to shoot with. sRGB, if you're not familiar with either of those, is going to be your standard, international standard for the RGB color space. It's most accepted. It works fine. But if you do prefer to shoot in Adobe, that's where you would change that, is right there. A little bit more JPEG enhancements. Again, this whole area is kind of just JPEG enhancement. So there's Sharpness, you can add sharpness to your JPEG images, contrast, saturation. Now, you'll notice if you do mess with these a little bit, they're not super prominent. They're very subtle changes. So if you push your saturation, I think it only goes to +3. If you push it all the way, it's not going to be like, you know, neon red here and blue here. It's subtle. So it's not a dramatic JPEG adjustment, but it is there. And then that last one is the tone gradation. So you can do a high key or low key, or normal. Again, only JPEGs, and it's not super, super dramatic. I usually leave those alone and don't mess with those too much, but you do you, boo. Sorry, I didn't know that this went all out. Yes, so auto is going to be normal. Low is going to decrease your shadow brightness. High key, it's going to increase highlight brightness. So you can make those adjustments. Again, like I said, it's pretty subtle change. I think that might actually be the end, so we can go over questions. That was it. We made our tour around that whole super control panel, guys. You did great.
You did great. I love that. I love that you
boring classes.
No, well, we can change that. You need to do the fun classes too. So I have one more question. The questions have been kind of lean. I'm surprised at that, but you know, could you talk about, and I'm guessing not all of the models have this, spot highlight versus spot shadow metering?
Well, so one is just going to highlight for one or the other. So if you're having a very dramatically different scene and you want to focus for the shadows, and that's, or not focus, sorry, expose for the shadows, that's the area you're trying to get, you will use your shadow. If you're trying to focus on the bright moon, you're going to use your highlight and use that for focusing on that bright spot and ignoring the dark space. Does that make sense?
Yes, that totally makes sense. I get it. I totally get it.
And then regular spot metering literally just follows your like focus point around and will just highlight there. So I'll use just regular spot metering a lot when I'm doing, if I use any sort of auto PSA mode, I will use that on like moon photography because it's so bright, and so I'll really narrow it down. With spot metering.
Cool. All right. Well, if for those of you tuning in, if you have questions, we will be wrapping this up shortly. So did you talk about grid focus point on the SCP super control panel?
I forgot to put that slide in. Oh gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody tell on me. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Let me
You're in so much trouble.
I know I'm busted. You know what's funny is when we did continuous autofocus and single autofocus and all that, I was like, I feel like we're missing a thing here.
And that's what we were missing. So we're glad that you asked that one.
I'm going to bring this slide up and then I'm going to start it from here. Slideshow. Okay. So yes, right next to that, and how I missed that.
Let's try that again. Oh, there you go.
That was weird. It wasn't doing it. Okay. So this guy right here under your white balance. So right now, I don't have all the slides that show you the different ones, but if you follow along with me, so right now, this is all points active. So if you select that, that's going to have every one of your focus points that you have available on your camera active, which is great sometimes. If you have them all active and you're pointing your camera at a busy scene and there's like a car here and a tree there and a mailbox here and a duck somewhere, your camera is not going to have any idea what you're trying to focus on. So it could pick the duck. It could pick the car. It could pick whatever has the best contrast and the sharpest edges, right? So all points active, I don't like to run on a lot, but if you highlight that in green and hit OK, you should be able to use your left and right arrow pad to see through all the different autofocus size options you have. Actually, that's a lie. I don't think it's the arrow pad. I think it's your back dial. Doing this by braille is hard, guys. It's all muscle memory at this point. But there's a lot of different ones. The EM10 has the least amount of different sizes and arrays possible, but most have like the 5-point cross, which can be really good for, you know, like sports or like individual person activities or things like that. I oftentimes use the single large rectangle. So it's one single rectangle, and I use my arrow pad to move it around to whatever I'm trying to focus on. If I'm doing something really precise like macros, I do a lot of bug photography. When I'm trying to focus on like a bug's eyeball, I will use that single fine point, which is available in the EM5s and the EM1s. I cannot believe I left this slide out. Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
But yeah,
It's
so
okay.
I will use
We'll
this
forgive
single
you.
fine point and hover it right over the eyeball. And that's the spot that I know I'm going to be focusing on. So I'm not relying on my camera to guess what part of the bug I want to photograph. I want
Right.
to have the eye in focus. And then
Totally.
there's usually a 9 square rectangle, which covers a little bit more area, which can be good for bigger moving subjects for sure.
Okay.
And then if you have EM1X, there's a whole bunch.
Oh, right,
You can
right,
even
right.
customize it and make it like a line this way or a line this way.
Wow. Okay.
There's all kinds of stuff you can do there with the EM1X. But yeah, definitely want to familiarize yourself with which types of focus points you have because they'll live in there. And then get the muscle memory of making quick adjustments to it because depending on what you're shooting might call for different autofocus squares and sizes of array. So definitely
Okay.
get comfortable with changing those on the fly.
Okay. So I know you have another event, so we definitely have to wrap this up in the next few minutes. I'm going to ask a couple more questions.
Yep.
We have one guy named Bob who has an EM5 Mark II, and he says the camera doesn't show the super control panel. Instead, it shows an L-shaped arrangement. How do they get to the super control panel if something? It sounds like
Okay.
maybe the menu is wonky.
Now there's a different view of it. That's the Mark III. Hold on. See, we're doing this live. This is why I don't like doing lives because then I'm like going through my camera.
It's okay. It's okay.
It would be worth asking what mode he's in first before I go too
Oh,
deep
okay.
into
So,
this.
Bob, let us know
But I
what mode
will
you're
tell
in.
you how to change it.
Okay. And then I have a couple of bird-centric kind of questions. And I know that a lot of people who go into the Olympus system love doing wildlife and bird photography. So we'll get into those in just a moment.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where the live guide is on here. See, I hate doing live stuff because then I got to find things in the deep menu.
Well, and that's also a great one to consult your manual for if we don't have enough time to get into this. It's challenging sometimes. Also, it's sometimes one of those questions where if you were standing right here, we could just look at it together. But obviously, we're on the internet.
Yeah, if
So
I
that
could
makes it a
see
little
his
bit harder.
camera, I could fix this
Yeah.
so fast.
Yeah, that's how
But
this
I'm
works
also not
sometimes.
finding it in here. What the heck? I thought it was
So,
in
Bob, why don't you take a peek at your user manual?
And if
And
nothing else, we can always set up a time where you can forward email over to me or something like that, and we can go through it, and I can see what his actual settings are without him being
okay,
able to respond to me in live time. I'm not sure.
yeah.
But
Or
there is a button to toggle super control panel on and off, and it's in the menu, and it's possible that he just toggled that off, and he just
and you
needs to
could also
reinstate
give
it.
the store a quick call and ask for Dion, and he could
Yes.
give you probably a little bit of help. So
Yeah.
let's dive into a couple more of these questions
Okay.
because I know you have to go soon. So with the face recognition stuff, would you have that on for bird photography?
No.
No.
Not
Okay.
human faces, because it's only detecting faces. However, if you stayed up really late last night, like I did for the press release that just came out, the EM1X just announced that we're developing the bird recognition auto intelligence.
Okay.
Not auto intelligence. So that's coming.
Okay.
Yay.
So
But no, I would not use the face recognition for birds. I would use either continuous autofocus or continuous autofocus with tracking and using that target box around them.
perfect. So someone else was asking just that question. So if you are curious on photographing birds, tracking mode is where you want to be, especially if they're moving. So hopefully you can move along with them.
Yeah. I mean, if they're not
So
moving super fast, I use single autofocus as well. You know, if I'm doing more like bird slow portraits and things like that, yes. But if you got birds in flight and things like that, you're probably going to want to
Yeah,
be using continuous autofocus or continuous focus with tracking.
right.
Um, or hang out for another class with Glazers when we have Steve Ball around doing the bird classes, and he will
Yes.
go into great depth of all the different camera settings
All
he
the all the
uses.
settings, all the
Yep.
settings. So I know that a few of you have some additional questions. The phone number for our store is on our website. So if you want to, you could email me those questions, and I can work with Mishalla to try and get those questions answered over the next couple of days or later this week, because she's got to take off for another event. But you can give the store a call. That phone number is on our website, and the website is just glazerscamera.com. My email address is kateh@glazerscamera.com. So a couple of you with those follow-up questions, feel free to send me an email, and I'll work with Mishalla to get those answers for you as best as we can, considering we're all in different cities and all that good stuff. So Mishalla, I want to thank you so much for your time, and as always, Olympus, for helping us to provide a variety of topics and education for people to learn more about their cameras and learn more about photography and specific techniques in general. For everyone who tuned in, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We do have more programming happening throughout the rest of November, going into December. So check out the schedule at glazerscamera.com/workshops. We are also open during this crazy time. We know the holidays are going to be different this year, so we're trying different things to bring you the best deals we can during the holiday season. So we're working with brands like Olympus to get you special discounts and offers. If you registered for this session, check your email out shortly for a special deal just for you. But there's also like a lot of great stuff happening with Olympus right now. There's some crazy good instant rebates. There's a trade-in program. There's all the things happening. So check out our website, check out our newsletters, and take advantage of those special offers while they're around, because they don't last forever. So anyhow, Mishalla, I want to thank you again. Have a great day. Good luck with the rest of the launch, and we'll see everybody soon. Thank you all.
Have a great night, guys.